So welcome everybody to this June webinar for TELedvisors. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands of the Aranda people of Central Australia, where I live, work and create. And I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'm grateful for the beauty of the desert that has many lessons to teach me. I encourage you to share your acknowledgement of country in the chat. And I also had, you've probably seen this map before, but if you're not sure of the name of the country where you're sitting at the moment, you can check out that map. So today I'll introduce the session and then I'll introduce the presenters that we have, and then I'll hand over to them to take us into that conversation. So TELedvisors is an Ascolite SIG, and our community includes academic developers, learning designers and education technologists, amongst many variations of those titles amongst third space practitioners. This presentation responds to a timely and increasingly contested debate about the role of learning and teaching units, sparked by recent critiques of pedagogical expertise alongside renewed sector advocacy for their importance. Drawing on perspectives such as those presented in Schofield and Wright this year, that's two different articles, I should say, and situated within the policy context of the Australian Universities Accord's emphasis on accredited teaching and qualifications and professional standards. This session reframes the question from whether LTUs, or central teaching units, you might know them as, should exist, to what they, should they exist, and what do they need to be to become, and whether institutions can achieve sustainable transformation without them. Using Southern Cross University as a case study, the presentation demonstrates how LTUs and third space practitioners or professionals act as critical partners in addressing complex cross-institutional challenges such as digital transformation, assessment and curriculum renewal through the deliberate development of institutional capability. We, as in Ruth and Kevin, are arguing that the true value of this work is measured by the demonstrable shifts in what institutions can do, highlighting capability, educational and transformational outcomes as the key measures of impact. Ultimately, the position is that effective partnership between academics and third space professionals are essential to innovation, adaptability and the development of institutional capability. There's a closing provocation, and you may have seen some provocations on LinkedIn as well. Might Schofield's critique be right in part? We must put that in. So we're really privileged today to be joined by two wonderful leaders that will discuss and provoke, and we encourage your honest conversations in the chat. So I will introduce Professor Ruth Greenaway first. She's the Director of the Centre for Teaching and Learning at Southern Cross University. She's an experienced leader in technology-enhanced learning with a strong track record of driving digital innovation and educational transformation in higher education. As a third space professional, Ruth brings deep expertise in learning design, digital strategy, and the future of technology-enabled education. A short introduction to Professor Kevin Ashford-Rowe. He is the Pro Vice Chancellor, Learning and Teaching at QUT, and a recognised leader in higher education innovation. His work spans authentic assessment, curriculum transformation, academic quality, digital learning, and the impact of generative AI on teaching and learning. Known for his contribution to authentic assessment, Kevin has worked with universities, governments, and international organisations to support educational transformation. So I would like to, at this point, hand over to Ruth and Kevin. Thank you so much for volunteering your time today and presenting for our community.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. I guess we could start with our initial reactions to the Schofield and Wright articles. When I first read it, I couldn't believe it. You know, really, do people out there think like that about the learning and teaching units? I was pretty shocked, and I thought, oh, actually, I can probably think of some examples of some people here that think along those lines. And so, in the end, I tried to unpack a little bit about what Schofield was really saying, and I'll talk about that a bit more in my presentation. But I'm Team Wright all the way. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Ruth. And while I am sharing my screen, I mean, I'll also acknowledge that I'm sitting on the lands of the Cubby Cubby here on the Sunshine Coast, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. But I'd also like to acknowledge a number of the colleagues who I've had the very great pleasure of working with in different institutions in this conversation. So it's great to see Penny, and it's great to see V, and it's great to see you, Lorraine, and it's also great to see you share from other times and places. So it's really, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be back in the conversation, and apologise to anybody that I may have missed. So what I'm going to do now is just work my way through the presentation. If you just bear with me 1 second, can you all see it? Is what I should say.
Yeah, it's all good, Kevin. Thanks.
Hang on a second.
Not now, but when you reshare.
I will reshare and share. Right, everybody can see that?
Great.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, the notion about should we or should we not have central learning and teaching areas is kind of, it's not a conversation, and it's not a relevant question. So I'll put my cards on the table up front and say, yes, of course, universities, organisations that teach and operate at scale, whether they're in the learning or the teaching space or both, clearly need to have repositories of expertise around learning and teaching to help them to discharge their business in the most efficient and the most effective manner. But I am someone who has always believed, though, that whilst working out the central area, I understand that we are consumers of resources, not contributors to the bottom line. So that means that we've always need to be very clear about the value that we add, the ways in which we add that value, and what our value proposition is to the institution going forward. So, so for me, it's not so much a question of whether we should or shouldn't have central areas. And I actually welcomed the article from our academic colleague in the US who questioned whether we should exist or not, because these are the narratives that often exist in institutions. And if somebody doesn't say it out loud to your face, you don't get the opportunity to make the counter case to say why you're actually barking mad and completely wrong. And it might also be that they're not necessarily totally barking mad or completely wrong, but they don't always understand the value of what we provide. And that means the onus is on us to make sure that we're providing that information clearly back to them. So for me, the questions are more around two hard questions, not so much whether we should exist or not, but how we as learning teaching units and third space professionals, and I am actually very drawn to that phrase, I think it makes a lot of sense. How do we demonstrate the criticality of our value to institutional transformation? And let's face it, whether you're looking at the technological transformation via the impact of Gen AI most recently, or the governmental impact and the things that are happening out of ATEC and an Accord, we know that transformation is the business of the sector at the moment. And then how can we continue to make sure that we demonstrate the value that we add? And I'm not necessarily going to answer those questions, because I don't think that they are simple questions to answer per se. But I do think that they are two questions that should be informing our professional practice almost on a daily basis. So, so the usual framing is, as it says on the left there, that we need to justify our existence by proving that we are contributing to the transformation of the institution. I actually think that the better question that we should be asking is, how would universities transform without us? And I'm sure that there would be transformation, but how would that transformation appear to the academic community that were delivering it? How would it appear to the student bodies that were on the receiving end of the education offerings that we design, develop, and provide for them? And I think when we ask ourselves that question, that just one moment, that the honest answer is we wouldn't be able to do what we do sustainably, and we wouldn't be able to do it at scale. And bearing in mind that most of us don't have the luxury of working within small liberal arts boutique colleges or universities, but we work in major organizations that operate at scale. That means that we've got to be thinking about innovation and transformation at scale and in sustainable ways. My university is a university of some 50,000 plus students, give or take, depending on how you measure them. That means that we have to be clear and consistent about what does it mean to operate and provide an experience to those students at that scale. So it's not so much for me a question about whether or not we should exist. It's more about where are we now and where is it we need to go to and what is it we need to become. And when I say that, I am acutely aware that I'm talking to colleagues from a number of different organizations, a number of different types of organizations. And as was brought home to me earlier today by a conversation with a colleague in Mary Immaculate College in Ireland, it's also an international conversation which carries its own particular contexts with it. So in the hope that she might pick up on this a bit later on, I'd like to acknowledge Catherine Whitehurst from Mary Immaculate. So in answering these conversations, the first thing I think that any of us need to do is contextualize them back to the institutions and the organizations that we're in, because maturity is a mindset, but how you mature and what you mature from and to has to relate to the circumstances and the context that you find yourself in. So just bear with me. I'm having a bit of a challenge because things keep appearing over my screen. So the real point is of all of this, all of us face challenges that don't actually sit inside any single unit or entity. The academic community, I don't believe, can in and of themselves solve the problems and the challenges that they're dealing with. And to come to that, a central learning and teaching unit or entity can't solve the problems of the institution without deep engagement with the academic community, because very often those challenges are manifest in that space. And we're all aware of the challenges that we're facing at the moment, whether it's generative AI, the challenge around assurance of credentials, particularly from a validity perspective. There's always an ongoing access and inclusion conversation. Tell me a university that's not deeply engaged in curriculum renewal, digital transformation, and then we've got the added layer over the last 3-4 years of regulatory accountability. But as I say there, none of these are purely academic or administrative problems, and that we actually need each other. We need a close alignment and a close engagement between the central learning and teaching unit and the academic community to give us the best chance of solving these problems. And I'm sure that there are colleagues in this space who may have heard me say this before, but my challenge to us as central entities is to work out how we become the partner of choice. So not the service provider or the servant to an academic community, but a partner that brings specific and very important expertise into important conversations that marry up with the discipline expertise that academic colleagues possess. And through the marrying of both of those, the synergies that you get out of those conversations, I think that's where you start to solve problems. So Academics bring us a range of knowledges and knowings. They bring us the deep embedding of the disciplinary knowledge. They bring us the understanding of the disciplinary knowledge in the context of where there may be professional bodies and accreditations. They bring us, hopefully, the research that sits around that discipline. And they should also bring us an understanding of standards. And I think increasingly, particularly in the age of Gen AI, a recognition that ultimately the determination of quality, particularly of quality of an assessment outcome and whether an individual should or should not be credentialed, rests within the context of it being an academic judgment. So not a function of an assessment tool or the design of assessment tool, but using the evidence of an assessment tool to help to make an expert judgment. What do we bring? Well, we have people, whether they're professional staff or academic staff, who spend time researching, engaging in the literature, undertaking design experiments, reflecting deeply on what does contemporary education design look like? What is a compelling learning and teaching experience from a disciplinary context for a student body? What is the emerging digital, technological conversation? Where and how should we be informed by what the technology can tell us? When should we change the way that we do things because technology affords us new ways of doing business? When should we push back on technology and say, no, the digital ecosystem already has the resources to do that? We also bring knowledge and experience around project and change management, quality assurance, and that kind of cross-institutional reach. And in fact, a conversation like this today is a very real example of that. So from a simplistic perspective, for me, academics create disciplinary capability. We create institutional capability. And sustainable transformation occurs best when those two elements work in genuine partnership. So back in 2013, I wrote a short paper for, I think it was called EduCalls Australia at the time, but it was around making the case for a learning and teaching centre. And 13 years ago, I said we needed those centres because teaching matters and it's too complex and too important to be left to chance. And I still hold to that. I do think teaching matters. In fact, 80 to 85% of the income derived from most of our institutions is from learning and teaching, not from research. So there's a financial imperative, but there's also a moral one in that we go and sell to prospective students the idea of engaging at our institution because we'll provide them with an education and, for the most part, a credential that will enable them to succeed in the world beyond university. And they're paying for that. And that means there is an imperative on us institutionally to ensure that they're getting the absolute best experience that they can and the best ability to access and engage with that learning and teaching. But then there's a strategic case increasingly because institutions, I think higher education probably is being more challenged than it ever has been. Certainly in my experience, I think the stakes are higher and I think the case is stronger provided that we communicate and prosecute that case properly. So we are currently very much in a paradigm around developing resources, delivering workshops, supporting projects. I think maybe going forward, there's a bit of a provocation for me. I think particularly in the context of Gen AI, the question I'm being asked is what has changed because of our engagement with the Central Learning and Teaching Unit? Not so much what is it we did, more what is it we are enabling the institution to do now that it couldn't necessarily do before. And I think the risks that we run as activity can measure the wrong question. So it's not so much about are we doing a good job, it's are we doing the right job? So if we get it right, has the institution become better able to do those things that are listed there? Have students benefited from improvements in their experience? and has the institution enhanced its capacity to adapt? So I think, in closing, for me, the value of what we do is not something that should be measured by the services that we provide, but more measured by the capability that we create. And I think that you build institutional capacity by building institutional capability. And at the end of the day, the single most important relationship, I believe, in a university is that between the teachers and their students. And our role is to ensure that we better facilitate and enhance those conversations. So the goal is not to provide a service as such, it's to build institutional capability and be the partner of choice. So I don't think the future belongs to academics working in isolation. I certainly don't think it belongs to us being central education bureaucracies that run the risk of becoming increasingly less relevant because we're not engaged. I think that the crux of it, and I know I'm talking to an audience who entirely gets this. It's about the partnership and how we manage that partnership and make sure we get it right. And on that, I will stop my share. Hope that I wasn't on mute the entire time.
No, that was really good.
Doesn't look like I was. That's a big relief. And I'm happy to go to Ruth.
Thanks, Kevin. I will just do the sharing and make sure we do it right and that I'm not on mute.
You're right, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you. How's that? Still good?
Good.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the specific context which Kevin alluded to, and that is the Centre for Teaching and Learning here at Southern Cross University. We've been pretty busy over the last few years, as I'm sure most central units are. But I'll start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which I work, and it's the Bundjalung people, and I pay respect to their elders. Each Monday, I send out a Monday morning email to the centre staff, and I've been sharing a Bundjalung word each week, and last week the word was gabe, which is a small native honeybee, a sugar bag bee. Though it's small and often unseen, the gabe's work sustains life around it. It reminds us that quiet contributions matter and that sweetness often comes from patient and humble efforts. A reminder to value both the sweetness in life and the unseen work that makes it possible. And I think there's a subtle reminder there for staff working in the third space. I'll just thank my colleague Amy from the Centre for Teaching and Learning for providing the words each week, which come from the North Coast Aboriginal Language Toolkit that CTL is building in our new LMS. Just a little bit about me to start with. I've occupied both professional and academic positions while working in the third space, so I think I have some experience to comment on some of the writings that we were referring to earlier. I've been a teacher, casual academic, course coordinator, academic developer and director in both a professional position and also in an academic position. You'll see there's a quote from an academic that we've supported and worked alongside. And I've added some of these quotes throughout the presentation as a reminder of the unsolicited feedback that we receive, but certainly not to validate the work that we do. This is a high-level look at the CTL team. We work in the third space, which in my mind is the centre of gravity, because we are balancing the work between the university's priorities and the academic capability building. We have a very successful team that delivers on strategic priorities across the university through our academic portfolio office. And what has made the CTL so successful? Well, first of all, we have a very strong support from our executive leaders, in particular, Pro Vice Chancellor Academic Innovation, Professor Erica Wilson, which we're very thankful for. And it makes a huge difference. And We're a successful team because we're seen to build capability and we establish relationships that are built on trust. We work in partnership with our academic staff in other areas of the university by providing advice rather than a mandate. We make sure we stay away from "you must do." And we evaluate everything we do and learn and make changes. So we send out surveys or we have focus groups depending on what we're doing. We may be researching some of the work that we're doing. We have a lot of research and scholarship of learning and teaching around all of our projects. We have a great culture and the right mix of skills, and we have very talented team members. So all of those things together ensure we are that centre of gravity. And one of the things I make sure we do is align our strategic our work with the strategic priorities of the university, and then align that with our performance reviews and KPIs. They're also aligned. And I found that it's a good approach because it gives direction to everyone in the centre and they can see where they're contributing to that bigger picture of the university. So our teams consist of digital designers, educational designers, and yes, these are called many different names, as we know, educational technologists, academic developers, who are academic staff, they're academic teaching scholars, and we have managers of each of our teams. And at the moment, I am finally advertising for an admin coordinator, which again will help us with our strategic projects. Each year we collaborate on a shared purpose and develop a centre charter, which, as you can see, starts with partnerships because we all believe that's the most important thing. So we're not a service, we actually partner with people across the university. And this is co-designed with staff and used to align our work and help us to know our barriers. It's an important piece of work, and we've removed any reference to service. We highlight, obviously, partnership because partnership matters because you can't enable institutional change without it. We can't enable sustainable change ourselves, but our academics and staff can't either. So it's all about that partnership and the relationships that we build. And as Kevin highlighted with the quote at the bottom of the screen there, I added that one, stole that because it was very relevant. So why partnership matters? We work in partnership to address the complex cross-institutional challenges, such as the introduction of the Southern Cross model. Our VC talks about wanting to see ubiquitous AI, which is posing quite the challenge. The LMS transition we're currently undertaking, and then assessment reform in the form of programmatic assessment. And we draw on collaborative expertise, collaboration between academics and educational specialists working in the third space, blends our subject knowledge with innovation, and that's supported by change management. And we have all of that change management and our comms plans and our change plans, etc., in the background. And sustainable institutional change is enabled through scalable solutions. And there's another great quote from one of our academic staff members. So what CTL brings to transformation, I've drawn on Kevin's fourth slide. So I kind of checked off what we do and what was listed in that presentation. So educational design expertise, we develop effective and coherent curriculum structures, online materials and assessment. The digital and AI capability, so CTL, test and learn about new technology and then support staff in how to use it, how to embed digital technologies and integrate Gen AI to obviously enhance any learning experiences for our students. Learning analytics, we evaluate and we look at analytics in everything that we do. It informs our work, basically. Change and project management, I talked about that. There's always the planning behind anything before we roll it out. Accessibility expertise, so we embed UDL in all that we do, and we try to influence where we can to make some of those changes around assessment, various ways of presenting materials and providing assessment, etc. Quality assurance knowledge, we stay on top of the regulatory environment, which, as we know, is ever-changing, and there's lots of things going on there. And cross-institutional reach. Because we work across each of the faculties and colleges, we know where across the university we can find examples of good practice, and what research in the scholarship of learning and teaching is occurring. And we can connect staff so that we can have those projects across the institution. So this is our specific context. It's the transformation of the curriculum and the move to the Southern Cross model. The CTL provided strategic direction for teaching and learning reform. We project managed across the faculties and colleges, and our academic developers, who are teaching scholars, they manage the transition for each of the faculties and colleges with a team of ed designers, and they all did it in a slightly different way. We worked on capability building in curriculum and assessment design in partnership with the faculties, and this was a large piece of work as we were moving the units from session-based to 6-week terms, but also taking a whole of course approach. And the usual work of the development of ensuring resources and workshops. There's a big cultural change piece towards scholarly student-centred teaching and reporting of progress to the academic portfolio office to make sure that we were on track. So the Southern Cross model consists of 6 terms of 6-week blocks. For a full-time load, students study 2 units per term over 4 terms, but they can do study across 6 terms if they would like to do it faster. So huge piece of work there. Southern Cross model is made up of self-access learning via modules in the learning management system and class learning as well. And the main changes were, so learning is acted, guided and focused. There's no lectures. Exam blocks are gone and face-to-face exams are a thing of the past, except of course for accreditation requirements, and there's not many of those anymore, which is good. And no more than 3 assessments for a unit, which we're still working on because we still believe that 3 is too many. 2's better, and moving to programmatic assessment. Maybe one day we'll only have 1 assessment or purely formative. And the CTL was the centre of gravity for the 3 years it took to transform the curriculum to the Southern Cross model, because there were over 100 courses and 1,000 units. So how do we demonstrate value? By delivering on the strategic priorities, and through that reporting, making sure that we're always providing value. And we're now seeing through the success rates, they've increased from 70% in 2019 to 90% in 2025. And the satisfaction rates have risen from 83.4 to 89.8 between the same time period. So we're getting some great results. And now we're basically doing it all again. We're now in transition of the learning management system from Blackboard Classic to Blackboard Ultra. And we're providing all the operational leadership around the migration, institutional-wide communication and coordination. We're doing a digital educational uplift. We've developed some standards for unit sites to ensure that we have consistent navigation by adding a wireframe in all our units, and the students so far are really enjoying that. You can see from the quote there. There's extensive staff training and professional learning involved in all of that. There's ongoing support and consultation that we're providing through drop-ins, information sessions and training, and the clear focus on enhancing the student experience. So we're always checking in with the students to make sure that what we're doing is enhancing their learning through those surveys and pop-ups in Blackboard. Here's just a picture of the scale of what we're doing. 108 new units, 923 transitioning, so 1,031 units in 1 year. Yes, I said 1 year. We don't have a huge team, so the planning and the communication and the partnerships have really been key. And the start of the transition in January this year was pretty rocky. In term 1, we didn't give our academic staff enough time to review their units and build their assessment. So in term 2, we made sure that we gave them more time to do that piece of work and greater support as well. We were able to give them some more one-on-one support and had those realistic timeframes, which they were grateful for. And our good relationships that we'd already built meant that we could move forward, and our academic staff really forgave us for not having the greatest rollout in the beginning, as we did listen to them and we reacted to that feedback in a timely manner and made sure that we listened. And one more of the large transformations is our response to Gen AI. I'm sure we all remember the text to RFI and the action plans that we need to be rolling out now. Obviously, a large piece of work, and that fell to the learning and teaching unit here, and possibly across other universities. And we organised a coordinated university-wide approach. So CTL's been building capability and using Gen AI. We've been renewing the curriculum, and we've provided the university with tools to support assessment reform, assessment security, and supported students through developing some tool use descriptors which showed the students when they can use Gen AI and how they can use it in their assessment. So back to demonstrating value, and Kevin's slide 8. So I had a look at each of these to see how we are demonstrating value. So with the capability outcomes, staff are better able to design an assessment and understand UDL, etc. in their unit sites. Educational outcomes, our students have definitely benefited and they're telling us that. And transformational outcomes, so institutional capability has increased, and I love seeing the innovations and the things that our academics are now coming up with in using our systems and coming up with some really innovative and different ways to assess, because they're basically being given permission to be able to do that, which is really good. In closing, back to the articles again. Learning and teaching centres are arguably more important than ever as we begin to see ATEC's priorities emerge, and I'm really pleased that there's a strong focus on student learning and teaching accreditation, because these areas align directly with the core responsibilities and the things that we do in our expertise of the learning and teaching units. And hey, maybe we might even get an OLT, who knows? And maybe the authors were right about one thing, suggesting that teaching and learning centres create a gravitational force away from colleagues' offices. In many ways, this is a strength rather than a weakness, because in an increasingly complex environment, it's valuable for colleagues to be drawn out of their spaces, and then where the expertise around curriculum, pedagogy and educational innovation can be shared. And I see that as a learning and teaching unit. So learning and teaching units, they don't replace collegial relationships, they extend them through the partnerships, creating communities that enhance teaching and ultimately what we're all here for, which is improving student learning. So centre of gravity is where the weight is perfectly balanced, and I argue that that is in third space. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. That was great.
I will stop sharing somehow.
So there's been quite, there's a bit of chat happening, and you've already answered one of the questions that I had, which was how can we fairly measure the change? You've put up quite a good explanation of how you're measuring that sort of partnership work and the results that you're seeing there. Not sure if Colin and Penny have seen other questions, but I'm just scrolling through the chat, and I was just wondering before we come to that sort of Q&A, Kevin, if you had any questions for Ruth on her presentation.
No, none at all. I think that, Ruth and I did meet over a coffee here in Coolum and had a conversation. So we lined it up. But I think kind of my reflection would be that what I had to say was fairly generic and not exactly earth-shattering. But what Ruth did perfectly, I think, was demonstrated how you need to, we worked up some principles, and Ruth demonstrated how you take those principles and you contextualize them to the challenges in your individual institution, and you work out your own plans and your outcomes based on that. There is no blueprint as such, I don't think. If there was and it worked, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because we would already be in the perfect structure. But I think it is entirely contextual. So I think that's what Ruth gave me, was that sense of pulling those principles down into practice in a deliberate way.
Thanks. So Colin, you had one question in the chat, and we might do your question and then go to the audience if anyone wants to ask a question. I'm reading your question as, can we or should we still make a case for the ongoing quality of teaching and learning that we facilitate, and the way we support a culture of valuing teaching and learning?
In addition to the transformative work that we do, which is obviously a pretty strong selling point with uni exec, which is, obviously pragmatically something that, we do for survival.
Did you want to have a crack at that one, Ruth, or do you want me to go first?
Go for it.
And I kind of did respond a little bit in the chat, Colin, but I think that the challenge is that we have to do both and be all things to all people. And I certainly take on board your comment about the pragmatism of demonstrating to those who hold the purse strings upon which our survival depends that we are hearing and responding to the agendas that they set, whilst at the same time working out how we resource to support the communities that we engage with, who need often much more fundamental and down-to-earth support. And increasingly the worry and the challenge for me is our resources are finite. I don't remember the last time I ever worked in an institution where they said, we're just going to give you some more money for some more educational designers or some curriculum developers. It's normally, how are you going to do more with less? So I think what it comes down to for me is being really, really clear about what it is we do, how we do it and why we do it. And also at times being prepared to push back and say, actually, the way that you want that service provided to you is not the way that we do it anymore. And we don't do it in that way anymore because we just can't afford to, unless you want to go executive dean or faculty PVC to the vice chancellor and explain why your central learning and teaching area needs more resources.
Great, thank you. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of this article or the response, so it's really quite an intriguing situation. So I enjoyed listening to the insights from Ruth and Kevin. Because I've worked across sectors, I often am in a situation where it's like you're doing professional development and you're counting the metrics and you're measuring as a workplace and the uplift of staff skills, and that's the metric. Whereas I know in universities and schools, we have these entities called end users, students, and they have their own set of metrics and measurements. So in this situation where this academic is critiquing, the use of learning and teaching centres, etc., what is typical in the other metrics? Do they extend into kind of like university as a workplace type thing, or is it really focused on the student metrics as the kind of thing that measures whether the change has been achieved or documenting the change? It just struck me as I don't really know the answer, even from universities I've worked at myself. So I was just wondering, is there a standard approach, or it's the whole spectrum, or it's too complicated to even think about, or I don't know. There's a question in there somewhere.
Thanks, Mark. There's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to, and that's what's good to surface, I think.
Yeah, but I understand the question, and to some extent, Mark, it's the vibe. So I'd say that going back to Colin's point before about our institutional masters and purse string holders, they're very drawn and driven by what those cross-institutional national indicators about student experience, teaching experience tell us. It turns out they're a highly competitive bunch, and first thing they do when they get those metrics is to see how they measure up against other universities in same kind of groupings or local areas. And if they come out ahead, then they're reasonably happy. And if they're behind, then word gets passed down through the chain and we hear about it. But I think that the challenge is it's in the business bit. And it goes back to what I was saying before. We've got lots of metrics that tell us that we're doing a good job, i.e. lots of workshops, staff coming, but it's drawing the link between that and impact on the enhanced student experience, which for me over the last 20 years has been a real challenge, because what we do impacts on the experience by second or third hand, not directly.
I could probably just add to that success looks different at every single level. I think you said the whole gamut, and I think, yes, that's what we need to do. So we are reporting really early on to the number of transitioned units, for example, the number of units using Gen AI, those sort of stats, and they go through to a teaching and assessment committee, and then all the way through to speaking at academic board about the impact and how many preprints articles we now have through scholarship and those sorts of things as well. So I think it's probably, and then to those national and international metrics, and even the student success and the student satisfaction surveys that I put up as well. So I think it's everything. You measured everywhere you look and in a different way. And I particularly am always asked for metrics. How many workshops did you do? How many academics came? And, how much scholarship of learning and teaching is happening? That's one of the hardest questions there is, I think.
I think we have to be a little bit careful as well, because to some extent we become or we are what we measure. And there are a certain number of measures that are foisted on us because they're national or governmental, but it probably plays into that space, I think, about thinking about what is it we want to do, and then how is it we want to achieve impact, and then working out a bit around how might we measure that.
Thanks, Kevin and Ruth, for that response. While we wait to see if there's any other questions from the room, I wanted to come back to the partner of choice aspect. And so, Kevin, you mentioned that was like a focus for your crew to become a partner of choice. What's something that you're doing it's obviously recognizing that you're competing with other options. If there's options in the faculty for development, or if there's other skill bases in the faculties, then what's something that you're doing to become the partner of choice?
So Wendy, there's probably former ACU colleagues of mine who may be cringing when they heard me say that, because they're probably thinking, oh my God, hasn't he got a new tune to sing? And the truth of the matter is, actually, I don't have a new tune to sing. So I find that in leading organizations or leading entities, and this is something I picked up on when I first went to Griffith, and I arrived there after Glyn Davis had been there, and I noted the significant impact he'd had on the institution. And if you asked anybody at Griffith University at that time, what's the strategic goal? They'd say, we're going to be top 10. We're going to be a top 10 university. Now, most of them couldn't actually unpack what that meant or how it looked, but everybody knew it. And so it struck me that setting aspirational expectations, that you support a community to unpack the specific meaning of that for themselves, can have value. So when I say partner of choice, it's firstly, that word partner is really important, because we can often be seen as almost a set of servants, master-servant relationship. And I actually hold our expertise in far higher regard than that. And I believe that when we do what we do properly, we are genuinely partners to the institution. And when I say partners of choice, it's not so much that there are necessary competing entities where people can go. It's just that when an academic community is challenged with a particular problem to solve or something, an activity or an action that they need to have, that they choose to engage with the institutional partners who exist. And we don't just, you can't just label yourself a partner of choice and go in and be a partner of choice. That exists because of the hard groundwork that my colleagues do day in, day out, engaging with individual academics, engaging with course cohorts, engaging with leaders, and at every stage in that conversation, demonstrating that we are adding more value than just, we're not just here to solve your problem or dot your I's and cross your T's for you. We're actually genuinely here because we can partner with you to help you to transform and enhance what it is you're trying to do. So that's where it comes from. And it is a bit of a simplistic mantra, but I do actually believe that I'm more interested in leading an entity that is partnering an organization than one that is somehow in a master-servant relationship or subservient. I value our expertise equally to that of the academic community. It's just manifested in a different way.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I love the highlighting of that service relationship versus partnership. It's certainly something that I've seen develop over the last few years. And I've got a question for you, Ruth. How did you build trust? Like your explanation and your sharing today of transformation was just amazing. You know, that Southern Cross model is huge. How did you build trust with the academic staff and professional staff during periods of significant change?
Can I say partnering again, which is exactly what Kevin was just talking about, and that we need to be seen to be listening. You know, like the start of this, our transformation of the LMS, we gave academics 2 weeks to review their units and then look build their assessment as well in that time frame. It just wasn't enough. They were marking and coming back from leave and doing all sorts of things in January. And so we built the trust by saying, we've heard you, we are going to change these timelines for next time. And you have to follow through. You have to be able to make sure that what you're saying you can deliver on. And we were able to. There was times when we couldn't. Because we just couldn't change, you know, the timeframes. The Southern Cross model, 6 weeks with 2 weeks in between for marking and returning grades is really tight. And we just need to be really mindful of that and respectful of academic time around that and working alongside. Working with first adopters as well, like bringing people into the fold and building that trust, then other academics start to get a bit of FOMO. And go, oh, well, actually, I want a bit of that too. So that works really well. And I bring in the resistors, so people that are really going, I just don't want to change. I just don't want to be learning another system, etc. I bring them in and we put a lot of hypercare, we call it, around the technology and the building and the supporting them so that they feel confident when they go into the classroom. And that works really well because then they become a trusted partner with us as well. And then they talk to other academics and really let them know that the partnerships are there for them as well. And speaking with other academics, I guess, in their faculties.
Great, thanks, Ruth. Yeah,
it takes a lot of time and relationships. I say partnership, it's a relationship. You know, every academic wants to talk to you about their discipline or something that's just happened or why they're late for the, you know, or student things that are happening. You know, you have to be there for them as well. Can I put counsellor on there as well? Sometimes it's just too overwhelming, all the change, and academics and we get upset, you know, and we're humans. So there's the human element in it as well.
Yeah, definitely the affective work, and it's quite often hard to quantify that time that's needed until you've already spent it. Mark.
Thanks. If there's anyone else that wants to put their hand up, please. I thought, well, I might as well. I saw a little summary of the fellow that wrote the original article, and it, you know, focus on the content kind of, expertise. And my immediate response was, what a yawn fest, because I've seen that. It's very familiar to me. However, to be sensible and practical and strategic, it's a problem that needs to be addressed, kind of thing. And if it's kind of, so I'm just wondering, how can this beast be addressed on a practical level? Because there's lots of ideas, and I agree with all of the ideas that have been explored so far. But I mean, what are the next steps, sort of thing, as a kind of third space practitioner sector, or or not sector, but I'm interested in what you almost like a summary of what do you think is the dialogue. I think for me, as an establishing trust is really two really crucial elements. But I'm just wondering of your thoughts on next steps.
So I'm looking at Colin's comment there. Some people will never engage. We need to decide how much time to invest in them. And that's entirely true. There is a small tail of, I'm not sure if we can use the phrase Luddites, but effectively the people who are going around smashing up spinning jennies. But I think, Mark, my answer to your question is, again, I go back to context. I could answer that question for you if I sat down with you for a period of time and sought to understand your particular institution, your central area, where it sits at the moment, what are the challenges that you have, and out of some of the principles that I've provided, and I think, again, Ruth did a great job of unpacking some of those in her particular context, that's probably where the answer lies. So I think the answer to that question rests with each one of you who is in a central area wrestling with your own challenges, because you're at different parts of the conversations and in different ways, and dealing with different aspects of the challenges, again, in different ways. But maybe it's holding to some of those principles as you go through those conversations, so you don't end up being drawn into a space where you find yourself seeking to be all things to all people when we can't be that. Ruth, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I think I'll leave that
or
one.
Not.
I could speak from our context. My next steps will be not to have these huge transformational projects for a little while that affect every single unit and everyone across the university, and do some really focused work, and probably that would be around programmatic assessment for us, which I see as really exciting work.
Thank you very much. Well, that's perfect timing to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, Barbie. Thanks, everyone, for your virtual applause for both Ruth and Kevin, and for my colleagues, Colin and Penny, and the TELedvisors crew for hosting this. Keep your eye out on the Ascolite events calendar. We have these webinars every month, the last Thursday of the month, and we look forward to seeing you there and continuing this conversation in whatever spaces you're connecting with people. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Wendy and colleagues,
facilitating,
for the
Wendy.
opportunity. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.